Today on the WhereTraveler Podcast, our host Teresa Rodriguez takes a stroll through the East Village with Neil Ryan Walsh. He's a writer who can curate a wonderful experience in many places, especially the East Village. And to know the East Village is to know about some of the most important artistic and literary movements of the last century. Roughly defined as the Manhattan neighborhood east of the Bowery and 3rd Avenue between 14th Street and Houston, the East Village was originally a farm owned by Dutch Governor General Wouter van Twiller. Next to own it was Peter Stuyvesant, who was the last Director General of the colony of New Netherland from 1647 to 1664, and whose family held on to the land for more than 7 generations. A descendant started selling off the land in the 19th century, and by the 1840s and 50s, the area became the central destination for the great Irish and German immigration. Later waves brought Russian, Ukrainian, and Jewish immigrants, and they established strong and vibrant communities. In the 1960s, the East Village became the center of art and counterculture, boasting famous residents like Andy Warhol and Jean-Michel Basquiat, poets and playwrights to include Allen Ginsberg and Sam Shepard, and musicians like the Ramones, Iggy Pop, and everyone who got their start in the legendary club CBGB. Neil guides us through the East Village, in and out of restaurants and ice cream shops, and gives us a lesson in the rich history of this beautiful neighborhood and how it all fits into the glory of New York, with our host, Teresa Rodriguez.
You're listening to the WhereTraveler Podcast, the audio companion for WhereTraveler magazine in print and online. For more information, go to wheretraveler.com. And now, Teresa Rodriguez, Editor-in-Chief for WhereTraveler San Francisco.
Hi, this is Teresa Rodriguez with WhereTraveler Podcast. We're on location in the East Village of New York with Neil Walsh, who is a historian and an expert in this area. We've met at the fantastic restaurant that's been here for, 65 years?
Right, yeah.
Veselka. Is that how you pronounce it?
I believe so. I don't speak.
You don't speak
I don't speak Ukrainian.
Veselka is a restaurant that was established in 1954, right next to the Ukrainian national home. I love this. So what brought you, what made you interested in this part of town?
Well, this is one of the more interesting parts of town, and I think that it is really where the avant-garde is in New York historically, and it's been that way since the 50s. Now, the reason, I wanted to walk in here, by the way, just so you could see. This is the Ukrainian restaurant I told you that looks like it hasn't been, the decoration hasn't changed since the 60s or 70s. So this is a Ukrainian club. It's a social club. A lot of these were formed, I think, after the World War II, when a lot of Ukrainians moved to this area. Before that, it was a German area. There were also some Czechs in the area as well. But mostly this was kind of this German, Eastern European, and that's probably one of the reasons the Ukrainians settled here. Now, if you look, the door's over here, but let's look inside here. It just looks like it's like a frozen time capsule, doesn't it?
Wow, totally. Or a bomb shelter, one of the two.
It's really interesting. And the food here is excellent, just like it is next door. Hi, how are you? Oh, sorry. No, we were just taking a look. Just looking. But they also have some interesting, they have a ballroom behind it. That's also
really?
That's also kind of like an old school ballroom.
I love it. And they play Ukrainian music? And what's that, like polka? I would think that's...
Because the Ukrainian population here is very small now, and it's aging. Most of them have moved out. Like any traditional ethnic neighborhood in Manhattan, they've all had their heyday, at least the European ones, and they've mostly moved out to Brooklyn, Long Island, New Jersey. So they rent out the space. So, for example, on Monday nights they do a tango night. So it's really interesting because they'll have tango dancing and they'll serve Ukrainian food with wine in this old 1950s ballroom. So
I love it.
Get this kind of interesting ambience that happens in New York, and that's the kind of things I like about the East Village.
Yeah,
there's always a lot going on. There's a lot of ethnic communities that have moved in and out, and they have left their traces here because a lot of the traditionally the rent was lower in this area since around the 50s. You had a lot of beatniks moving in, you had a lot of poets moving in, a lot of like jazz musicians, and then you had that in the 60s, 70s, the same thing. The Hare Krishna movement was actually started down here.
Really?
Which is a really interesting story. This, I think his name is Bhaktivedanta Prabhupada. He came here, he may have been close to 70 years old. He was a lawyer in India. He came to New York. He sat under a tree in the East Village and started chanting Hare Krishna, and a bunch of hippies started following him.
Love it.
The movement only was around for about 4 years, and it became this big international movement, but he was really... It all started down here in the East Village. Allen Ginsberg also lived down here, the poet, the great beat poet. So you have a lot of history, artistic history, as well as ethnic diversity. A lot of the punk rock movement was also centered down here. You had a lot of clubs that are now closed, like CBGBs, Coney Island High. Those clubs no longer exist. But those punk rock clubs is where places like Talking Heads got their start down here. So there is a lot of history, and that's why I chose the East Village.
Wow, that's really fascinating. And what I really enjoyed, like just even looking around at the buildings here, you've got so many different ethnicities, as you were mentioning, that are all merging together here.
It's very layered, and there are things that get like left behind here. Like this show Stomp has been around since the late 90s.
Oh, yeah.
This was a particular kind of theater that was happening back then, and it's still popular, is still here. A lot of comedy clubs down here. So yeah, there's a lot to do and see, and you can have a really good night, I think, in the East Village if you just come out, have a really good time, and not spend a lot of money and have a really interesting experience. So it's a good place for tourists to come as well when they really want to get something different that they can't get in most other cities. They get a real genuine experience. It's not something that's it's not something that's manufactured at all.
Right.
It's very dynamic. So this was a kosher bake shop, Moishe's Kosher Bake Shop. They actually was a full-functioning kosher bakery up until about a month or so ago. I was very surprised that it went out of business. And this is happening all over New York at a much faster rate now than ever, where these kind of historic stores are going out of business because of gentrification, which we're seeing much faster in the East Village, and the raising rent prices. Here's a place I love. Actually, Via della Pace is a really good Italian restaurant. It's been around for, I think 20 years or so on East 7th Street. This is a great vegan ice cream shop called Van Leeuwen. I can't eat dairy, so this is a very popular place. They have vegan and regular ice cream, and I think that's where we're going to stop right now.
Oh, that sounds fantastic.
So here's Van Leeuwen ice cream, and this is a ice cream shop that sells both vegan and regular ice cream. I personally only eat their vegan ice cream because I'm dairy-free, and it is well worth the $6 you get for a scoop because it is just wonderful. It tastes just like regular rich ice cream, and I'm not the only one who believes this. At night, on the weekends, especially in the summer, you will see a line all the way down the block for this ice cream shop, and it will snake around inside the store, and you can wait up to an hour for ice cream.
Wow.
But it's well worth it, and it's best to come, I think, during the day to the East Village for that reason. If you're a traveler, because you get access to all these different bars, restaurants, and places when it's not crowded.
And what is the location of the ice cream?
Sure. The location of the ice cream is between 1st and 2nd Avenues. Okay, it's closer to 2nd, and it's on East 7th Street.
East 7th in the East Village. And how do we pronounce the ice cream place again?
Van Leeuwen. Van Leeuwen.
Yeah.
And here you get a lot of cool little stores like these fresh juice press stores. You get this place called the Cupcake Market that makes these unique cupcakes. You have celebrities' faces that they make in, here's a Janet Reno face. Jerry Seinfeld face.
That's fantastic. And this is all...
Frida Kahlo, yeah.
And this is just on 7th, right?
Yep, this is all on East 7th Street.
East 7th Street. Fantastic. So let's talk more about the history and the immigrants that arrived here. So you were mentioning that this was one of the first stops when people, after Ellis Island, right? They came into these tenement housing.
This would have been after Ellis Island. Ellis Island probably would have been, so the Ukrainian Polish would have been after World War II.
Oh, okay, got it.
And then, the horrible things that happened to Ukraine, especially Ukrainian farmers in the Soviet Union. There's a lot of different revolutions after World War II that made Hungarians, Ukrainians, Poles come here. And they settled here in the East Village. So yeah,
why do you think that they chose the East Village?
You know, I have a theory about this. I believe that, I don't know this, I tried looking up a little bit of the history before, but I've also noticed in parts of Texas where you had large German populations, you tend to have a lot of Hungarians, Poles, Ukrainians. They tend to kind of, and Czechs, they kind of move with or near the places that used to be German, and the East Village used to be German, actually. There's actually a German library right down the block on 2nd Avenue, which still has the original architecture and German written outside the front. And that was like a lending library that was created for the German community here. Certainly south of Canal Street, you had a large Italian, or in Soho, south of here, you had a large Italian population. You had a large Portuguese population in Soho. So people tended to move to these neighborhoods like in groups. You had a smaller Chinatown than you had today. A little bit north of here, I think it was on 15th Street, you had a Czech population. But a lot of these have moved out. They moved out in the 80s, really, and they were done. And now you have remnants of them left. But with the Ukrainian and Polish community down here, it's still, I think, very much a living tradition.
Well, you know what I find also pretty interesting about this area is that the buildings are pretty low. We've got, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stories is what I'm seeing as the average height of the apartments and buildings here, where when you go uptown a bit more, you're really getting into big skyscrapers and that loss of feeling like a neighborhood.
Exactly. And I think that the zoning laws in New York are very, very strict. Also, the historical codes. So buildings cannot be, if you're going to make any changes to the outside of a building, it has to go under all kinds of different, there's all kinds of different laws. And, and if you change the appearance of a historical, in a historical neighborhood, you have to keep the building looking as it originally did. So, for example, in New York, you can't even change something as simple as a air conditioner and make it bigger or smaller than it was when you first rented out or bought the space. Wow. You have to kind of maintain the historical look of the building.
That's fascinating.
So that's one reason I think New York, because we have these historical societies and all these laws protecting buildings, and also very, very low active local politics in New York. So people are very engaged at the local level. In Manhattan, it's called the district level, where they're engaged in politics that level. So any change that happens, any kind of big building project that wants to go up, there's always a lot of community participation.
So, Neil, tell us what the boundaries are of the East Village.
So the boundaries of the village, what's called the village, are anything below 14th Street.
Okay.
And so the village is basically below 14th Street and above Houston Street. So that would be considered, I think, the village. And where I live over by the West Village is a historical neighborhood, and then as you go a little bit north of me, I think there used to be an area called North Village that's mostly been lost. That's now called either meatpacking or something else. But the East Village is a very large area, I believe. So it would start officially from 5th Avenue, although I think that nobody would call the area around 5th Avenue the East Village. There's a small area called 4th Avenue. It's a very small avenue. So I think the East Village starts from 4th Avenue all the way to the river. Okay. And actually, it after 1st Avenue, it becomes Alphabet City. So what we're seeing here is Thompkins Square Park. If you look down that way, you'll see Thompkins Square Park. And that is the historical kind of center of the punk rock movement, very active 80s, 90s. That's where the first hipster look, So that's where you get like the first like hipster look, that traditional hipster look. That's from this kind of area. We'll walk down to the park.
And that's St. Mark's Place.
St. Mark's Place is 8th Street. So St. Mark's Place goes from here down to like 2nd or 3rd Avenue, and as it gets further down, it becomes more like a Japanese store. But this is St. Mark's Place. Again, it used to be, when I was younger, it used to be more punk rock. There used to be some a club there called Coney Island High, which is a big music venue. Now it's almost all restaurants and luxury condos. But you still have here small little stores, tattoo parlors. It hasn't really lost its unique character.
No, I love it. We're by Physical Graffiti, spelled with a T-E-A, like tea.
Tea store.
And it's a cute little tea store. Yeah, what I'm digging about this area is that it really feels like a neighborhood. Like, yes. I feel like when you get up and, you move uptown, It doesn't feel like a neighborhood.
Especially Midtown, yes. Especially Midtown.
You could spend the day just walking all these streets here. I love this. Dunwell Donuts.
And every time I come down here, I always, here's a bookstore. I mean, where you have bookstores, like little local East Village books.
Let's go across the street and take a photo of that. No, it really does look like out of a movie set.
Mm-hmm. It does, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I could see, Samantha from Sex and the City, walking.
Highest price paid for scholarly libraries, of which there are many in New York in people's apartments.
And this one right now that we're in front of is called East Village Books. Help support this bookstore. Stop here first when you have books to sell. Let us know about the estate libraries. Review copies, music videos, all formats.
It smells like an old bookstore.
And I love the fact that it's next to a sock store. So you were telling me before we got on the podcast about the Japanese influence in this area.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that?
I'm Teresa Rodriguez, Editor-in-Chief of Where San Francisco, and you're listening to WhereTraveler Podcast, where we love to talk about anything related to travel. For more information about this episode, as well as Where Traveler, be sure to check out WhereTraveler.com.
Japanese influence in this area.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that?
That started, from what I can tell, and Japanese culture is one of my things, but that started really in the 90s. You started to have a lot of Japanese move in, and I think that was a second wave of Japanese people. I think the first wave was like the corporate businessmen in the 80s that moved in the 70s and 80s, and Japan's economy was very big. In the 90s, I think in Japan you had a lot of money, still from the old bubble economy, and a lot of those, the kids of those businessmen would come to New York to study, either art or fashion, and there were a lot of Japanese artists who studied here in the 80s as well. I mean, but there were fewer. So you had this kind of affluent group of Japanese coming in to New York in the 90s who were interested in art or in learning something maybe like hip-hop music, jazz, piano, fashion, photography. So you tend to have a very artistic group of Japanese coming to move to the East Village, which is why the East Village Japanese community is very unique. You tend to find a lot of artists, So when I actually studied Japanese in college, and I would hang out around here and hang out with Japanese people, and I thought every Japanese person in the world was like a creative
genius.
Just like a creative genius that was into really cool stuff. But it was very typical of the community that was around here. And I think you still see a lot of that, where the Japanese community here is very creative. They're very artistic. That's a point of pride, I think, here. And so you have a lot of Japanese restaurants, establishments, stores down here that are a little more fusion. They're not traditional. There's something new. They still have a Japanese flavor about them, but they're really cool. And you get a lot of them down on 8th Street, St. Mark's Place.
Okay, great. So we're coming up to St. Mark's Place. Is this a park?
Oh, this is Thompkins Square Park. This is the Now, East Village does have one boundary. It's called Alphabet City. So this is Avenue A, B, C. It goes down to the river. And that is not I think it's officially a part of the East Village, but it's called Alphabet City. So this is one of the kind of borders of the East Village.
Okay.
And Alphabet City in the 70s, 80s, 90s was like a no-go zone. It was just, really, really bad. And now it's again beginning to, it's been gentrifying for quite a while, but it was like the last enclave of like resisting gentrification up until 10 years ago.
So I find it interesting that you don't live in the East Village, but you love the East Village.
Yeah, I know, I do. Yeah, I spend more time in the East Village than the West Village. I thought I would have loved the West Village more, but I just like it down here more.
Oh, that's funny.
They're different. Now the West Village is it's different than it used to be. It's a very expensive place, as is the East Village.
Neil, tell us where we're walking right now. We're in a beautiful park.
Yeah, this is Tompkins Square Park, and I have a New York accent, so I never pronounce it the way it's supposed to be pronounced, but I say Tompkins Square Park. I don't know if it's Tompkins or Tompkins, but my accent interferes with that. So Tompkins Square Park, this is the borderline between the East Village and Alphabet City. This is a beautiful, beautiful park today. You can see there's a rose garden. There's like a little area here where they do movies in the summer. They do French movies. They do all kinds of international movies here.
And they got a great playground.
And they got a great playground for kids. Again, if you would have seen this 20-something years ago, it would have been all, junkies, very, very dangerous place. But now it's very clean and very beautiful.
Yeah,
and you
it's
can
gorgeous.
walk out in the middle of the day, in the middle of the night. Now, this tree has a really interesting history. This is the tree where the Hare Krishna movement was started.
Oh, wow.
Again, it's such a bizarre history. It was this guy, again, he was from India, and he came here and is about 70 years old and created this big international movement in about 4 years. But he just sit down here and just chant, and a bunch of hippies started gathering around him. And that's really kind of, people say this is where the hippie movement started. That is a claim. Allen Ginsberg was one of the first followers who also lived in this neighborhood. And actually, from what I understand, Christian devotees from around the world still come to this tree all the time and pray to it.
Well, let's get up to the tree and say Hare Krishna.
Let's say, feel the energy here.
Yeah. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Krishna Krishna. Hare Hare. Hare Rama. And does it even say... It does. It says it up there. It says the Hare Krishna tree.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool. Who knew that in the East Village that the Hare Krishna tree was here?
And then further down is where he had his... where his apartment was, and where he had the first Krishna center, but it all started here.
Oh, wow.
And some people even say that the whole kind of major influence of yoga, Indian philosophy, started right here at this tree. And it was one particular time when just thousands of hippies came on one day, I think in the summer, and started chanting. So.
Well, there you go. Oh, is there a plaque? Oh, there's a plaque.
There's a plaque.
Let's
you
go
can
check
read
it
that.
out. Well,
thank you.
I dig Hare Krishna. I think that he was like this cool guy who just, number one, he was blue. You got to love the fact that he was blue. Okay, here's the Hare Krishna tier. One of the Thompkins Square Park's most prominent features is a collection of veritable American elms trees. One of the elms, in particular, located next to the semicircular arrangement of the benches in the park center, is important to the adherent of Hare Krishna religion. After coming to the United States in September 1965, A.C. How do we pronounce that?
I think it's a Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Yeah.
There, you got it. The Indian spiritual leader formed the International Society for Krishna Consciousness in New York. He worked from a storefront on nearby 2nd Avenue that he used as the Society's American headquarters. Pronhabamda and his disciples gathered in Thompkins Square Park, where we're at now, in the fall of 1966, to introduce the East Village to the group distinctive 16-word mantra. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And if we did it properly, it would sound like this. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And that was just us. This is fascinating. Who would have known that this is where it all started?
This is where it all started. This is where the hippie movement all started too. I mean, Allen Ginsberg, beat poetry, jazz, people like Lenny Bruce. Really the whole history of a very important part of American pop cultural history started right here in the East Village and the West Village too. Here on East 9th Street, we have a few interesting things. This store right here, it's called Enchantments. It is a witchcraft store. Now, there used to be quite a few of these in New York, in Manhattan, I guess when that was a thing. Again, because of high rents, places like this are very rare. Now, the owners here take their craft very seriously. They buy all organic oils. They are very, very good at what they do. They're very serious about what they do. And they are very, very willing and able to educate you when you come in here. What I like about this place is these candles that they sell. They're these personalized candles. If you're having a problem in life, they will sit you down, talk to you about it, and they will formulate a candle for you with the right oils, the right herbs, and there's a long line of people waiting to get these candles because they work, and they are so serious when they do it. And even when I've seen them, I've spent a hours in there to watch them prepare the herbs, and they're taking it. No, it needs a little more of this, a little more of that. They're taking it very, very seriously, and I think that's one of the reasons they're in business is because they really do good work. But you don't have many places like that left in the city because it's just really hard, I think, to keep more than 5 shops like that, just because of the interest in the rent. So and then also down here, further down the block, right down there, you have Flower Power. This is a herbal store. Again, there used to be a few herbal stores in the East Village, but now I think there's only 2, and here's one of them where you can buy a lot of herbs. And again, for alternative medicine, sometimes you need herbs for different reasons. Here's a place where you can come get them, and you can actually smell them. You don't have to get them on Amazon from some supplier that you don't know. You can go to the store, and I think the thing I love about the East Village, the thing I love about taking people down here is the fact that you can show people really local, small stores, small businesses that are running successfully in the heart of a major city, and that are have experts that are really passionate what they do, making a living. That is a rare thing in the world today.
I love the fact that we're in the middle of a huge metropolitan city. With 9 million people live in the city?
Yeah.
And there's a park filled with kids laughing and playing and giggling and their parents and
it's completely safe. And this used to be, a total nightmare, decades ago, not that long ago in my living memory.
It's so fantastic.
It's really wonderful, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm just going to fill in our listeners that my mom and daughter are in that park right now. They're hanging out while we're roaming around the East Village.
Look at this guy in his perfect Italian blue suit with the driving loafers on his. That's fantastic. New York,
So fantastic.
So I remember coming down here as a kid, and there was a lot of just people with leather jackets, punk rockers, really, really interesting scene down here. There's nothing like that today.
So you grew up here?
Well, I grew up in New York, and I had family in Manhattan. I came to the city quite a bit, so I'm a native New Yorker. Yeah.
Can you tell our listeners about what you do and how they can find you?
Oh, sure. I run a company called The Japan Experience, and it's www.thejapanexperience.com. I also do acting work. That's a side thing I do, and you can check me out at Neil Ryan Walsh at Instagram, and I just talk about my acting process there, and I have a few projects that I'm working on right now.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, we really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to show us.
No problem.
I have to be honest with you, Neil, I would have never said, let's go to New York and let's go check out the East Village.
Yeah.
But this is a pretty special place.
Isn't it? I thought it was a great story. And these are the kind of travel stories. Now, this is a great place. This is a vegan confectionery, a chocolate shop.
I love it.
This is a great place, again, for people that are vegan. There's all kinds of little... And I think what happens is in New York, a newer designer will come to the East Village and now the Lower East Side. They'll start their business down here, they'll build their brand, and then they'll go uptown. Or they'll go international. So this is really where you get the avant-garde to this day.
Yeah, no kidding. It really does. It really does feel like this is where ideas are burgeoning, and there's a lot of feeling of growth here.
Yeah.
There isn't anything stale. I haven't seen anything,
nothing.
Soup, Tree Burger. I've got to take a photo of that. I'm like, and there's a line.
Right. Even the old Ukrainian place isn't stale, right? It's still vibe. Yeah.
And then it's right next to this. It looks like an antique shop. Wow.
And Teresa, I really think that when people go to travel, and this is just, I think people, when they're planning out economic policies, they have to think about tourism. When people go to travel, they want to go into small stores. That's why people come to New York. That's why people go to Paris. People don't go to Paris just to go to the Place Vendôme. They go there to see the small stores and to hang around the bakeries.
That was pretty awesome. So thanks for sharing that.
Oh, yeah. It's one of my favorite places. Absolutely.
Because that was pretty phenomenal. I mean, we've gone from Hare Krishna to candle making for clearing bad energy, right? That's fabulous. This is like a little vortex of super happy. I love it. You got this great park full of kids. You got the Hare Krishna tree.
Yeah.
I love it.
There's a place here right at this corner around 10th Street that is Thompkins Square Bagels, excellent New York bagel shop. On First Avenue, you have a place called Black Seed Bagels, which has Montreal-style bagels.
Now, what's the difference between New York bagels and Montreal-style bagels?
New York bagels are boiled, then baked. And in Manhattan, New York City has our water comes from upstate. It's all what do you call that? Reservoir water. It has a very high magnesium content. And what that does is when you boil something like bagels, it creates some kind of a coating on the outside, which makes the bagels really crispy on the outside. And that's one reason New York bagels, especially Brooklyn and Manhattan bagels, because it's the same source. People say Brooklyn bagels are better, but that's one reason New York bagels are so crunchy on the outside. It's the water. On top of that, you have Montreal bagels are baked in an oven like a pizza. So it's baked in like a wood-burning oven or like a coal oven with wood. So you get this kind of charcoaly, almost like bread.
Interesting.
And that's the only in New York, I think that's the only Montreal bagel place. They also have a little bit of honey in them, and they're sweet.
Okay. So what was the name of the place?
Black Seed is the Montreal bagel place, and right over here, Thompkins Square Bagels is also an excellent bagel place.
Fantastic. Well, you know what, Neil? This was so awesome.
Yeah, thank you. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was amazing. We walked a lot today, too.
Yeah, we did walk a lot.
We burned off that vegan ice cream and that Ukrainian lunch.
Heavy Ukrainian lunch, yeah.
So once again, I'm with Neil Walsh.
Yes.
And you can find him at
Neil Ryan Walsh at Instagram. That's my acting stuff. And then thejapanexperience.com. I write a lot about Japan, write a lot about Japanese travel policy, blogging, everything.
Okay, well, thank you. You heard it here on Where Traveler Podcast. Yes. This is Teresa Rodriguez, your host, and we'll see you online. Thank you, listeners, for joining me. You've been listening to the Where Traveler Podcast, hosted by me, Teresa Rodriguez. This episode was produced and directed by Pete A. Turner, John Leon Guerrero, and Victoria Shepard. To listen to this podcast, find out more information about the crew, as well as Where Traveler, visit wheretraveler.com, your ultimate destination guide.